Hi everybody, and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I'm making coconut caramel pudding. Now this is a recipe from my mother-in-law that she used to make for her kids, her family, in the 50s and 60s and probably into the 70s as well. Now, you know what? My husband makes this recipe, and I actually have never attempted this before, but I'm pretty sure I can make it. So we'll see how it turns out today. Anyway, it's one of those traditional 50s, 60s recipes that it's like a cake that you bake in a pan in the oven, but you also add a sauce to it. So you don't ice it or anything, it's just all in this pan. And then you put the sauce on top and it kind of percolates down through the cake. It percolates down through the cake as it bakes, and then you have this gorgeous caramel sauce in the bottom, and you end up with coconut on top. So let's dive right into the recipe, and you can watch me and see how this turns out. Hopefully it'll be just as good as when my husband makes it. So we're going to start out. Oh, and don't worry, metric people, I will be having all the metric equivalents in the recipe when I type up the recipe in my description box down below. So we'll start off with 1 cup of all-purpose flour. That's Canadian all-purpose flour. Now if you're in the UK or you're in the USA, that would be strong flour or bread flour. And then we add to that 1 teaspoon of baking powder goes in next. Now remember, baking powder and not baking soda. It's important to notice the difference. Alright, there's my baking powder in. And 1/2 cup of sugar, and that's just plain white granulated sugar, fine white granulated sugar. Alright, I'm just going to stir these together, just so I mix my sugar, my flour here together, my ingredients together, so it's more homogeneous looking. Not got any lumps in the sugar. Shouldn't be any, but sometimes there are a few little lumps there. Alrighty. I'm going to add 1/2 cup of milk, which is about 110 milliliters of homogenized milk, which whole milk, 3.5% butterfat. Here we go. If you hear this kind of humming noise in the background, I'm running the dishwasher at the same time, so multitasking. I'm going to stir the milk in here to my flour. There we go. There we go. Milk added. And now 1 egg goes in next. 1 large egg. You can use brown or white. You know what? The only difference I've ever found is that the color of the shell is different. The fact that brown eggs are supposed to be better than white eggs is simply marketing as far as I'm concerned. White eggs, I've used white eggs all my life, and you know what? They work just fine. The only major difference I find is that they're a little cheaper than brown eggs. So, what can I tell you? I'm just going to stir these together. And today I'm just using my trusty wooden spoon, and I'll be using my trusty fat scraper here to scrape the bowl. No fancy tools needed to make this recipe, because back in the 50s and 60s, a fancy tool was a handheld mixer. You might have a handheld non-electric egg beater if you were a well-equipped kitchen. Well, I shouldn't say that, because most people would have had an egg beater, but not everybody would have had an electric mixer, even a handheld one. Okay, and a pinch of salt. Now for me, a pinch of salt is like, quickly wave the salt box over. Just the amount of salt you can hold between these 2 fingers and your thumb. Just reach into a bowl, and that much, that's a pinch of salt. Okay? In other words, not much. Just enough to add a little teeny salty flavor. Okay. And there it is. There's my cake batter. But before I go any further, I'm going to just grease my pan. Now this is supposed to be a 2.5 quart, 2.5 liter pan, and make sure it's deep as compared to being wide, because this tends to splatter a bit in your oven as it cooks. So you don't want it splattering all over the stove. Okay, now I'm just going to take a little piece of paper towel. I do own a pastry brush, which I could get out and use if I wanted to, but I'm a bit lazy today. What can I tell you? Being just a bit lazy today. Now this is a dessert that you want to time so that it's out of the oven so that you can serve it warm. Because it's best served warm out of the oven. So you don't want to put it on in the morning when you're not serving until supper time. So that's the only tricky thing about this one. And it takes 40 to 50 minutes in your oven to cook. So yeah, just make sure I don't leave this little bit of paper towel in there. And now on to part 2. In a separate mixing bowl, you're going to put in 1 cup of brown sugar, which in my neck of the woods is sold as yellow sugar for some reason, or you can get your old-fashioned brown sugar. It just will caramelize a little bit differently. And you need a whole cup of brown sugar, which is quite a bit of brown sugar. And since I have 1/4 cup here, I'm going to use my math skills to know that I need 4. 1/4 cups equals 1 full cup, right? Because 1/4 plus 1/4 is a half, plus 1/4 is 3/4, plus 1/4 is 1 whole cup. 1 cup of brown sugar, 2 cups of hot water over here. All right. One cup of shredded coconut. Now I don't know about you, but I don't care if it's pre-sweetened or unsweetened. I don't care if it's shredded or whatever else there is. So whatever, as far as I'm concerned, coconut's coconut. And I use it all exactly the same. I know I'm not a purist, I'm not a chef. I'm a home cook. And we do things we improvise and do things a little differently. Now the most interesting part of this recipe comes next, and that is, now I'm supposed to add a piece of butter the size of an egg. Now I'm not exactly sure what the heck that is supposed to mean, but I'm going to try and cut off a piece of butter off of here and estimate how big it should be to be as large as an egg. I think she must have gotten this recipe from her mother, and their generation went in for things like a piece of butter the size of a walnut or whatever, you know? They didn't go in for measuring cups. So that's an interesting one that you'll have to kind of figure out for yourself. Now personally, I'm just going to put somewhere between 1/4 cup and 1/2 cup of butter in here and hope for the best. Because that's about how big an egg is. Everybody gets to figure that one out for themselves. I'm just going to stir this butter around until it kind of melts. Just make sure you put really hot water in, and it probably will help if you have room temperature butter that you're cutting into the size of an egg. Basically, I'd say it's probably somewhere between 1/4 cup and 1/2 cup. So, eyeball it. There we go. That's all dissolving now nicely into my mixture here. And here I've got this watery looking mess in my bowl, but I assure you it's going to turn into a nice, gorgeous caramel sauce to go with your cake when you're finished. It's all finished baking. Because then, next thing I do is I'm going to bake this in a 350 Fahrenheit oven for about 50 minutes. So, step 1, take mixture number 1, which is my cake batter, and put that in your greased pan, your greased 2.5 quart or 2.5 liter pan. It's close enough that in this situation you don't have to worry whether it's 2.5 cups or 2.5 quarts or 2.5 liters. It's basically the same size pan. Close enough to the same size pan. I'm just going to scrape my bowl and scrape my spoon into here. There's my batter nicely in my baking pan. And now I'm just going to gently pour mixture number 2 over mixture number 1. Gently. Gently, which means I'm going to use my spoon to kind of help guide it into the pan and go back and forth and make sure my coconut is kind of distributed on top nicely. There we go. Okay. And it looks like a watery, soupy mess going into the oven. Just going to move this over here so I can tip down the camera to show you. Oh, there we go. There you go. That's what it looks like going into the oven. I'll be back in 45 to 50 minutes to show you my finished coconut caramel pudding. And here it is, fresh and hot out of the oven, my coconut caramel pudding. Here it is, fresh and hot out of the oven, my coconut caramel pudding. And there it is. All toasty coconut on top and swimming in a wonderful caramel sauce underneath. Now what I'm going to do is leave this to sit here for 15 or 20 minutes till it cools off and the cake absorbs a bunch of the caramel sauce. And I'm going to dish up nice big bowls of it and I'll have it for dessert. And extra caramel sauce you spoon on top. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe today, and I hope you'll like, subscribe, make a comment, give this recipe a try, and let me know how it turned out for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed my recipe today, and I hope that you will like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and maybe give this recipe a try and let me know how it turned out for you. So as you can see, it's the holiday season here in Nova Scotia, and I want to wish everybody the happiest of happy holidays and all the best in the new year ahead. So from all of us to all of you, bye for now. See you in the new year.